Welcome to the Confessions of a Reluctant Caregiver podcast. We're happy you're here. On the podcast, we're certain that you'll relate to the caregiver stories and find comfort with your honorary sisters. Now, before we start, I want to remind you to go to our website, confessionsofareluctantcaregiver.com, and sign up for our newsletter. It's full of useful information that you can immediately use. Now, let's learn more about today's guest. Well, J.M., I am so excited about our guest today. We have Amy Goyer, and I'm going to tell you, she's a caregiver, but honestly, we all know she's so much more. Jay, I would love for you to give us a little bit of detail before we go in and have Miss Amy talk to us about her caregiver journey.
So I know, because I always tell too much. Natalie yells at me.
I'm like, don't tell her all at once.
Number one, Amy has sisters. So that's one of our favorite parts. We toss that out right in advance. So Amy has over 35 years professional experience in the field of aging. And I could spend a whole podcast sharing all of her accolades.
That's true.
She is a writer. She is a frequent guest on the Today Show.
Ooh.
She has been interviewed and made appearances on ABC, NBC, CBS, NPR, People Magazine, The Dr. Phil Show, and that's just to name a few. But she started her career as a music therapist and adult day services administrator. There's going to be some dancing that we may talk about in this podcast, which I
do love the dancing
when we talk about her story. But as Natalie says, she is so much more. She has been a family caregiver her entire life, her entire adult life, beginning at 21 for her grandmother, followed by other grandparents, and then her parents and a sister. And her caregiving journey led her from DC to Phoenix. And like I said, mixed in the story is going to be a little bit of singing and dancing, and also a little information about my favorite character, Mr. Jackson.
We do love Mr. Jackson.
Love Mr. Jackson. I know. I can't give any more away. I can't give
Oh.
any more away about Mr. Jackson.
That's right.
So, but Amy, you were the keynote speaker at the first event that Natalie and I went to in Virginia that we attended last year. You talked about your sisters. That left me teary-eyed at my table. And your story, it goes back to when you were 21 is kind of when you started, but it's all about your family. Like, it starts with your grandparents, and it goes to your mom and your dad and your sister. So it sounds like it's all about family. Like, it seems that's probably started way before even caregiving for you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's all about family when you come down to it. Right. Anyway, and I think my family probably is part of why I chose the career that I chose. And, and we're in, thank bless my parents for starting me with piano lessons when I was 5 years old and putting me in. And my dad was very musical, as you guys have seen videos of him singing with me. And, that led me down that path to music therapy. And then I ended up working in the field of aging right when I was stepping in to help care for my grandparents. And, it is a labor of love for me, caring for people. And I talk about the fact that not everyone is motivated by love. Many people are caring because they're motivated by obligation or responsibility. But I think it's important to know that we choose that. We choose, and I'm not saying that in such a way that, you made your bed, now lay in it, kind of, you chose it, because that's not helpful to anybody. Right. I say it in an empowering way, because I think, I've been through really, really, really hard times, but I always knew I was doing it because I wanted to be doing it. I didn't choose the situation. I didn't choose Alzheimer's. I didn't choose strokes. I didn't choose, all the other situations, but I did choose to take care of my loved ones. And if you choose it because it's a sense of responsibility or obligation, it takes you out of that victim place. So for me, it is about love and family. And, our family growing up, we didn't have a lot of money. Our vacations were visiting family. I don't remember really until I was older, really going on a vacation with my parents. We just didn't do that. We would go camping sometimes, but we would go visit relatives. And it was just always about family. And I think that's why it just was natural for me to step in and play that role over and over again.
So you were in Ohio. That's where you're from, right?
Yeah, I
Ohio?
grew up in Ohio. I was born in Indiana. I'm born
Okay.
in Hoosier.
I knew it was
raised a
Indiana.
Buckeye.
Okay.
Yeah, raised a Buckeye in southeastern Ohio, down
Right.
in the I'm a hillbilly, and in Athens, Ohio, my beloved home, by the way, of Joe Burrow, the quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals, who was
Mm.
visit
There we
winner.
go.
We're very proud. He was in school with my nephew. So, but anyway, it was a great place to grow up because it was small town, but a university town.
Mhm.
And so we had, the culture of that, but we had a farm outside of town, had cows, and I grew up riding horses and just a lot of outdoors activities, and just, it was a great place to grow up. You knew everybody,
Yeah.
which has its downside sometimes, but for the most part, it was just a supportive environment,
Mhm.
And then my dad left Ohio University to teach at Arizona State University. So I was a sophomore in college when that happened. So I ended up going back to Ohio to finish school. But my parents, my family was in Indiana, on both sides of my family, all in
Mhm.
Indiana. And so my parents were really far away from
Yeah.
their parents as they were aging.
Yeah. So they were still in good health, but had moved out there for your dad's job.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right.
Right.
And then at that point in time, is that kind of, you were in college and you were taking care of grandparents though? Is that right?
Right.
Is that
So-
kind of?
Yeah. So as a sophomore in college, my parents moved across the country. My grandmother had Alzheimer's, and my dad was an only child. And that is, you talk about family, that's a real issue for many
Right.
people. You and I, we're lucky because we have sisters, and we have, there's some kind of a safety net there. Not everybody always steps up and does everything, but
Right.
dad was it. Although he had a lot of cousins about an hour away. My grandparents lived in South Bend and his cousins were in Kokomo, but it's kind of different. They were an hour away,
Mhm.
And so I kind of played more. And because I was moving into working in the aging field, and then when I graduated, I did move to Columbus, Ohio, which is a little closer to them. And I worked in adult daycare, nursing homes, and, I was really working in the field.
Yeah.
And then later for the Department of Aging. And so it made sense that I was trying to, I got services started for them, and dad was managing stuff from a distance financially. And, I just, and my older sister, my sisters, one was in California, one was up in Cleveland, and one was on the East Coast. And
Yeah.
so, it all made sense. And I was really, I remember so much thinking when I was working in adult daycare, I was so frustrated because I was taking care of everybody else's grandparents, but not there to take care of mine.
Mm.
And that was hard for me. And so I did make a lot of trips over. I mean, I felt like, okay, somebody else take care of it. Hopefully somebody's doing what I'm doing. And we did end up having some good caregivers for my grandparents. They were cared for at home. That was their wish. And until they ran out of money. And then there was no Medicaid waiver program there. And at that time, they had to go in a nursing home, and then they died. My grandmother died in 4 weeks, and the doctor said it was because they weren't feeding her. She at home, and we had one caregiver, and she'd sit there for 2 hours and make sure my grandmother ate. And then granddaddy had started going downhill. He was 98. So he was a force of nature. He had taken care of her. He had been her primary caregiver for years. 95, I remember driving over there in the snow, and one of the neighbors came over and said, I tried to get over here and shovel your grandfather's snow the other morning at like 7 a.m., but he had already done it.
Wow.
Wow.
95. I like him.
I know. He was,
Wow.
like I said, a force of nature. And, that's one thing too. Like, I don't know who your role models have been for caregiving, but I've had many. My best friend's mom, who cared for her husband who had early onset Alzheimer's. My grandfather was in a way, because he was not the kind of personality that you thought would step up and do this kind of thing. Like, she always took care of him, and he was in the military. She, traveled all over the world with him, and, took care of everything. And he cussed all the time. He was, he was a big personality, Of course, he had a heart of gold in there. And and he did the best he could. He didn't shirk it, you know what I mean? Like he learned, he was putting trash bags on the bed when she was incontinent. He didn't know about stuff. So my role was kind of go in there, and I found that skip generation, I could get him to do things my dad, he was very stubborn, and I could get him to do things my dad quite get him to do, you know, that sometimes that grandchild relationship. Plus, I was working in the field of aging, so he thought I knew what I was doing.
I think maybe we see that Emily's daughter helps
Yes.
with mom sometimes.
My daughter comes in and does respite care, and she also works in the medical field. So when little Natalie Jane gets here, then mom just enjoys the dickens out of her.
That's so great, though. Yeah. And, intergenerational relationships are vital. It's natural. It's not normal for us to be age segregated. So I'm so glad that your mom has that. And I tell your daughter, I think she's fantastic.
Sometimes mom responds a little bit better. We call her Natty Jane. She responds a little bit better sometimes as well.
Right. And it's good to have that person that you can carry the message sometimes, right? Yeah. My grandfather, he was so sweet. I remember one of my biggest memories is he would have me do certain things. Like he was still, darning, not darning, but, mending clothes and sewing on buttons and stuff, but he couldn't see to thread the needles. So he'd take, the plastic bags that clothes come in from the dry cleaner, and he would get a bunch of needles, and I would thread the needle in different colored thread, real long, and he'd put it in that plastic and hang it on the back of the door in their bedroom. So he'd have, white, black, red, blue, pink, whatever, different colors. And then the next time I came, I'd do it again, and because he'd just make that last until I came back. And I'll just, for some reason, that always has stuck with me. That it was a little thing that made a big difference for him. It allowed him to be more independent. And he'd always come up with some little thing for me to do right when I was going out the door. And
yes.
It was just something to keep you around just a touch longer.
A little bit, yeah.
Isn't it funny, though, how it's the little things that we don't think of, that we wouldn't think of as important, that makes the difference for an individual who's providing care?
Absolutely. I agree. I think sometimes those little quality of life things, I think we're not just responsible for healthcare when we're caregiving. We're also responsible for making sure that person has quality of life. I mean, what's the point otherwise, right? And what are the things, whether, getting them their favorite chocolate or, freedom of choice is a huge thing. And giving that person the gift of being able to choose this chocolate bar, not that one. Or, be able to actually go to the store. My grandmother, my mom's mom, was a different story in that my mom had siblings there in Indianapolis, and my cousins were there. So she had a lot more support. And when my grandfather died pretty young at 77, and she never drove. And so she had to have somebody take her to the store, and she had to, and they would go mow her grass and do all that. So I was more like a respite person. I'd come for a weekend and I just adored her, and we would have fun, and taking her to the grocery store was a big deal. That was her outing. And she would take freaking forever to go to she'd look at every item. Look at that, read the label. Like she'd just be looking at all, didn't necessarily need that item. But when you think about it, like she didn't get out much. So I like to go shopping too, and it used to drive my aunt crazy, but I kind of could see that perspective of that was a gift. Just taking 2 hours to go to the grocery store when it really probably needed to be half an hour. That made a huge difference in her life, and she had the choice to, you could pick stuff up for her, but then she doesn't get to look at everything and choose the one she wants. You know what I mean?
I think when you have a life when you get into certain situations, there's so many choices that are taken away from you, whether you're aging as you're getting older and you're not able to drive, you're not able to do this. There's so many choices that are taken away from you. And whether that, or you're an individual with different abilities, or you are someone who has a chronic illness, your life has changed and your normal has changed. And so to have that freedom to go back and have that moment of normalcy that felt like the time before. And I can tell you, I know probably a ton of our listeners are out there like, yes, we love the grocery store too when we go by ourselves.
Yeah.
They love it.
And that can be right. And in fact, history repeats itself. And that when my dad had Alzheimer's later and I was caring for him in Arizona, I used to come home from my office and get him and go to the grocery store where would have taken me a fraction of the time, but that was his outing.
Really?
That was his socialization. That was his thing. And he was still perfectly capable of walking around the grocery store with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember so many times thinking, oh, I just want to stop at the store on the way home and be done with it. But no, I'm going to go get dad because this will be good. And we always had fun. I was always so glad I did. But it's hard as a caregiver. Sometimes you do just want it to be easy,
Yeah.
So you kind of jumping, there's so much of your story, Amy, but eventually you made it, you went to DC, but then somehow you also got to Phoenix where your parents were. So how
your
did
parents,
that
your parents flew the coop.
Well, I know
they
parents
left the
left.
homeland.
Yeah, no, I'm like,
They went out west, like they were like the Oregon Trail pioneers.
Yeah.
done.
Well, when they left, it really was, but I always thought, my grandfather actually homesteaded. My grandfather was born in 1894. He actually, as a young man, homesteaded out west. They were still doing homesteads back then. And he worked on the railroad. He was an adventurer. And I think dad had, a little bit of that in him. And my mom loved to travel. So that was a great adventure for them. But it did separate them from, a long distance from the rest of the family.
Yeah.
And but I think, good for them. And when they were ready to retire, they decided to stay there because by that time, my mom had a stroke. She had chronic pain. The weather back east was really hard on her and would have made a huge difference in her life span, I think, and her quality of life. And so they made plans to stay there. And then later on, my dad started showing signs of dementia like his mom had.
Mm-hmm.
And by this time, like you said, I had moved to Washington, D.C. I was working full time for AARP. And then there just came a time where mom was starting to have more and more health problems.
Mm-hmm.
Dad had been her primary caregiver with us coming in different times. I came when he had his hip replacement and, I was there a lot and my sisters were all, we kind of all helped in different ways. And their mom had been hospitalized. She'd had, I think, a UTI or something.
Mm-hmm.
And she'd gone to the hospital. Maybe she had pneumonia. I can't remember. And it became clear, a friend of ours saw them, went to the hospital and said, he can't handle this anymore. This is getting to be too hard for him. And so we wanted him to stop driving. He had glaucoma. So his vision was because of the early dementia, his judgment of what was with that wasn't so great. So it just like everything kind of blew up at once. And I had already quit my job to be a consultant so I could be out there more. And then I just was like, I have to be there. I just have to be there. And I had one sister who lived there and she had a daughter who had bipolar disorder. And she was really caught up with all that. She'd been going to doctor's appointments and everything with my parents, but it's hard when you have a child with special needs like that. And so that's when I picked up my life. And I had been going out there frequently here in DC. I flipped it so that I was based there and came to DC frequently.
So let me ask you this, because people have asked us about our decision-making.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about your sister decision-making process.
Kind of curious.
Because people have been like, they think we're more unique because we come very much together on the decision making. We do not argue about it. We have discussions. So how's the family side of the decision making between you and the sisters with helping for care for your parent? Because you said, I'm going to move here and swap it.
Yeah. Well, I became their primary caregiver. So I had the first power of attorney. My sister had been set up as the backup to me. And at one point, my parents actually changed that. She had been the primary because she lived there. And then I was the secondary. My other sister it had a complicated family situation going through divorce, so much going on. I think that was part of why they didn't put all four, or maybe they did put all four of us in order. I can't even remember now. But anyway, so at one point, my parents, before all this got as bad as it did, they had flipped it because Dad, I think, saw it coming of Mom, needing more and more help. My sister was she went through divorce. She had their child with special needs. She was, she was overwhelmed all the time. And I think they felt like they didn't want that on her, and that, of course, I'm the youngest, I'm single, I don't have children. Of course I can handle this, right? No, but because I worked in the field and everything, and because I was just able to do it. And so when I came out there, I took on that primary role. So in that sense, we found that one sister's in Maryland. She's not really in the situation very much. Mm-hmm. When there were big decisions, we would talk about them. So one big decision, when my dad was like, well, if we can't drive, I'm not staying in this house. And so he wanted, as long as they could make their own decisions, they were making their decisions and we were going to support them. And so, I facilitated help, visiting places. My sister went with me. We kind of narrowed it down to 3 and then took my parents there and let them make the final choice. Mm-hmm. And because we would have been fine with any of those. But 3 years later, after Mom fractures her spine, numerous infections, Dad infection, big downhill, they really needed 24/7 care. And so the decision on that was tough, because do we move them back to Ohio, where my other sister could help more, move them back here to the DC area so that my work and my boyfriend and my support system is here that can help? Do we stay in Arizona? And in the end, we looked into all these options. Like we all pitched in different ways and researched housing costs and, the whole thing. And in the end, we just all agreed that it would be much harder on Mom to move her climate-wise. Mm-hmm. And that the familiarity for Dad was crucial because of dementia. And so everything still being familiar was really helpful. So I moved him back in the house with me. And, at different times, I don't think my sisters might have a different story. You should have them on. But I don't think we really disagreed on big decisions. And there were, because, there's a gazillion day-to-day decisions. And I was the one we were living with. I was the one going to most of the doctor's appointments. And then my sister from Ohio moved out to help. And so she and I really talked through things. I think, in the end, I was the ultimate decision maker, because we found, sometimes you have to have a lot of decisions made quickly. So sometimes, you need that. But my sister was one of the paid caregivers for my parents. And so she 4 days a week, while I was at work and everything, she was making decisions all the time. So we just trusted each other, I think.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I heard you say in there in the midst of this that you also had a life. You were able to hopefully have a life because you were like, I could have moved them back because, I had a job. Yeah. I had a boyfriend. I possibly had another life. So because you're young and I'm thinking, okay, you have committed you're still very young. And so you have committed this portion of your life. And we have a lot of people that we talk to that have said, because Emily is young. Okay. She's younger than I am. And so
we always get to be younger than them, don't we, Emily?
I know. But I when you look back on your life, Amy, how does that play into, as you've developed your life, the caregiving? Do you feel like, okay, I gave up my life for caregiving, or did I get to caregive as part of my life? Do you ever look back and play that?
Good question?
That's a good question, and I realized pretty quickly that this is it. People would say, oh, you've put your life on hold. And I'm like, you can't do that. This is it. This is not a dress rehearsal. This is life. And just like you have a job change, you have a caregiving change. It's just the life path. So I consciously practice trying not to think that way.
Yeah.
I absolutely made sacrifices, and I was aware of that.
Mhm.
And I used to say I miss my life, because the things I did here in DC and my friends and my boyfriend and just my life, and I was in some ways really lucky because I got to visit my life. I would say, I'm going to go back and visit my life. I would come back for work and get to have a weekend and, visit my life. And so I just came to see it as, this is my life. This is what I have. I think the hardest thing was my relationship with my boyfriend, because, we had already been kind of long distance. He lived in Baltimore. I lived in the DC areas, and then to be 2,000 miles away, And so after, my dad, fast forward to, my sister and my mom and my dad have all passed away. We came together in 2020. I drove back during the pandemic, and we had never been together all the time. And so the past 3 years have been tough, to be honest. It's been a really rough transition. We have not been used to that. And we were, then you're in a pandemic, which, you're really together.
That's exactly right.
Then we start renovating a house, which what could be more stressful?
That brings you together.
Yeah.
Maybe, or apart. So it's been hard. It's been very hard. And we've gotten some counseling and some assistance because, we really did sacrifice that level of our relationship. And so I think that's, to me, the biggest sacrifice. The other sacrifice has been around my finances. And I went through a very, very rough time. I ended up in bankruptcy after I died, and that was horrible, humiliating, it demoralizing, and everything that you can think of. And I survived it, and I'm moving forward and doing the best I can to try and rebuild. And also, I became a consultant to have that flexibility, which is great in many, many ways, but no benefits and no saving for retirement. All of that is different. So I think that's a sacrifice that a lot of caregivers make in their work life. Thankfully, I always had work, and I feel so grateful for that. And I've worked with AARP is one of my biggest clients. I work with many other clients that understand what I was going through as a caregiver. And I'm just really blessed in that way.
Right.
But not everybody is that lucky.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone would go into caregiving thinking that I'm going to have to, I think you think you're going to sacrifice, but you don't realize the financial impact that it has.
Emily.
And that's the part. Emily is a perfect example, because we went into it as a team of 3, and Emily raised her hand and said, I'm going to do it after, we had 3 kind of failed assisted living placements where they weren't able to meet our mom's needs. And it was like, we had these grand ideas, right, Em? It was like,
I was going to work from home. It would be great. Mom would be independent. And that was not the case.
No. And then, you saying, I had no retirement. I had, I wasn't able to put my 401k. I didn't have insurance because our society and the way the government works, thank you, government, and we're all disruptors. Hello. We're trying to make change for caregivers so, they can have insurance. So, Emily,
thankfully I was able to get it, and it was better after the marketplace I was able to get insurance more easily, but it was expensive.
Oh yeah.
Expensive for me, and that's really rough. So Emily, did you keep working?
Unfortunately, no, I could not. No. She needed that level of care. I couldn't work. And so we were able to figure out that I could work for a company and care for mom X amount of hours a week. But like you had said, I do get a small reimbursement from them through the insurance, but getting insurance through that company, absolutely atrocious. So I've than without insurance. And it's tough.
Oh, that's really tough. Yeah. And like I said, I could get it on the marketplace, and the lower your income is, the better discount you get. And I was blessed to make enough money that I didn't really have that much of a discount, but not enough money that really offset it. It's so tricky.
It's the plight of the working. It's almost like a working poor. Like you make too much money, but not enough. And
that was my sister's situation. I was paying her to be, so my parents had long-term care insurance. My dad was a veteran, and I eventually got him veterans benefits, but that was later in the story. And aid and attendance benefits. And my dad had pension. They both had some Social Security, and they both had the long-term care insurance. So we were able to just kind of make it. But when my mom died, then we lost her Social Security and her long-term care insurance payment, which was about $3,000 a month.
Yeah. Wow.
So, when you're paying caregivers all day, I guess I kind of knew that it made sense for me to keep working because of my career trajectory. And I know so much of the data. You stop working for caregiving, you're going to lose an average of $300,000 in wages and benefits over a lifetime if you do that. So that was a high priority. And I was paying for the house and the food and which is where I ended up, I think, going off course. I was taking too much of it on, and then hit a critical point where I just didn't have it every month, as Dad needed more and more support, and then credit cards, and then 29% interest. And then there's you just can't get out.
But you're definitely a story that has to be shared, because we've talked to people, Amy, Cameron Huddleston for one, and she said she feels like that's a fall that a lot of people get as caregivers, like us, for example. Our mom, we weren't prepared. We thought our dad was going to always take care of our mom. And so we didn't have long-term care insurance. And she said what Cameron said was she sees a lot of children who feel obligated to take care, even financially. So when it's time for them, they're in this same position, then they don't have the funds to take care of themselves. And
it's so tricky. I mean, and the bottom line is, what are your options?
Mm-hmm.
If your loved one can qualify for Medicaid, they may be able to get in-home care. It may not be the greatest quality care, or maybe you get lucky. They can go in a nursing home. If you don't want your loved one living in a nursing home, then you're not going to do it. And you're going to sacrifice it, and you're going to, and so she's right. People end up in this situation where we are endangering our own financial security as we age. And there are the greatest, and like I said, and I tell my story because my parents did pretty well and planned, and I think their retirement income was around $70,000 a year with the long-term care insurance and all of that together. And
but you would think that's enough.
A lot of money, but think about how much it costs to pay caregivers.
Oh, it's
About it. And if you're having to pay them, for 8-10 hours a day, depending on what your situation is, I would do the evenings and the weekends in the beginning. But then I had to go out of town and for work. And then, it was, and I did live-in caregivers in the beginning because that costs less. But, caregivers need to earn a living wage too.
Yeah.
And now the costs are so much higher than what I was giving. I swear it's double.
Yeah.
How do people do it? I mean, really, you can't.
Yeah, I wonder, so here's an interesting thing. I literally, before we got on to record this, I had talked to my financial planner because I had made a change in employment. And I said, hey, I need to move my 401k over. And it made me, what you're saying when you said your parents, and I appreciate you saying that, your parents did well. $70,000 a year to live on, any person would be like, wow, that's a lot of money. And I'm sitting here thinking about how much Jason and I have set aside of how we want the amount that we think we want per year. And then that goes down per month. But when we were thinking about the formula, never once did we think about caregiving for us as we get older, because Jason and I don't have children. So we are so ultimately we're solo agers, and he's 10 years older than me, but I always tell him I'm higher stress than he is. And so I'm like, don't worry, you'll get me. I've got you some extra money. But I didn't that's interesting, Amy, because I didn't take that into account into my own financial planning, but we weren't raised with financial planning. We were raised under paycheck to paycheck and didn't know what 401k really meant as a child growing. Like, didn't really work that way. Pension.
Yeah, that's an important thing to think about. And honestly, I'm sure my parents thought they were taken care of. I thought they had long-term care insurance. Well, that long-term care insurance is not paying for the full costs. I mean, it was a huge help. But, even $2,000 a month when you need 24/7 care, that doesn't go very far at all. Even in an assisted living facility now, you're going to pay between $4,000 on the low end to $8,000 a month, easy. And then that's assisted living. That's not one-to-one care 24/7. So you get somebody who has dementia, then they have to go to memory care. That costs more, or you need to pay somebody to be with them all the time. Like I did the math because they could have moved to assisted living. And I thought, okay, I'm with them all the time. I work in these places. They are going to kick my dad out because he can't be alone for 5 minutes. What am I supposed to be doing? What's going on? And so I would either have had to pay somebody to be there when I'm working or be there myself. And for a lot of the time. And so then it's even more expensive. So I figure moving back in the house with me, I'm paying the mortgage. Because that was the other thing is, I think Dad probably made some not great financial decisions because of the early of the dementia. And, their house wasn't paid off, even though, they've lived there over 30 years, there was stuff. And you think $70,000 a year at that age, you're going to have your house paid off. Right. But no, I had a mortgage. So that cuts into every month. And I don't think they ever dreamed that they weren't prepared. And they should have been. They tried and they planned, and honestly, I would have been in bankruptcy much sooner if they hadn't done that, or like you say, I would have had to just quit working and barely live. That was enough. They planned for their retirement, not to support me while I take care of them in retirement,
That's a good thing. That's a good point. They planned for their retirement, not taking care of other people to take care of them.
Right.
That's true.
And what do you do if you can't work?
So you moved them, I know the story. So you moved them back in with you. And, you're talking about your dad and he could not be left alone. But I've seen the interaction and, there's so many people out there and people know about dementia and Alzheimer's and issues with people as they age. But what's so beautiful about your story, Amy, is that it's a hard story about as your dad ages, but there are ways. And I think a lot of it goes back to what your training was when your music and things like that. I just want you to share some of as your dad aged with your mom, and then also that little character that came into your life, Mr. Jackson.
Oh, that's right. Mr. Jackson.
Tell me about some of those best times, some of those times that even in the hard time, some of those times that are most memorable to you as you all progressed. So many good times. And I am so grateful that I had that time with my parents. I have no regrets, even bankruptcy and everything. I can't regret what I did because I did have those wonderful times. Like I used to, so mom had to get her nails done every other week and she had her hair done every Friday. And there was no way we were missing that. And Paul, her hairstylist, had done her hair like since they moved there in 1981. And so he's part of the family and it's nearby, and Dad would take her every Friday and talk to Paul and, and so, we continued that. And so I would take him on Fridays, and when I couldn't go, Paul would go get them or send his daughter to go get them and bring them. And, those Fridays I finally just realized I have to stop working early on Fridays. We're going to go do the hair appointment, and that's going to be our time. So I started doing what I called Fun Friday Adventures. And we would, after the hair appointment, we would go somewhere. We would do something different, like we would go to the mall a lot because in Phoenix, it's very hot a lot of the year and too hot for
walking outside. So we'd walk around the mall and have dinner or go. At that time, the Godiva chocolate place had this membership thing. And once a month, you got a piece of free chocolate. So we go and pick out our chocolates. And you mentioned Mr. Jackson. So my parents' dogs passed away. They took a friend's dog for a while. He passed away. And, my dad was very active and he loved to walk the dogs. And of course, we knew that would be really good for his brain. And so he wanted to get another dog and they wanted a rescue dog. And I'll never forget this. It was Christmas time and we were looking. Their last dog had been a Schnauzer Poodle mix. So we were looking for schnoodles. And right after New Year's, I found this, I was Googling, and I found Schnoodle Rescue. And this dog was this picture. And I was like, oh, Daddy, he looks like a good one. He said, yeah, he does. And so the woman brought him to the house and he ran in. And I think he jumped on. My dad would tell the story that he went to Dad first. But honestly, I think he went to Mom first.
That's okay. My husband says that our dogs like him better too. And I'm like, you're right. They like me.
But he very much became both of their dogs, but very much my dad's companion. Yeah. And his name was Jack. And after the lady left and we were like, yeah, he's staying. After she left, he looked at me and he said, I believe his name is Jackson. He deserves a more dignified name. Mr. Jackson. And he was right. And Mr. Jackson was extraordinary. He was not only the cutest, best boy ever, but he was extremely smart. Our vet said he was the most human-like dog she had ever encountered in her entire 35 years as a vet. He was very intuitive, and he just naturally became, was being a service dog to them. So eventually, as Alzheimer's progresses, Daddy doesn't want to go anywhere without Mr. Jackson. And so I got him some extra training, got him certified as a service dog. So he could go with them everywhere. Mm-hmm. So he would go to all his doctor's appointments and he was so good. And they would walk around the senior community where they lived for 3 years. And Dad would eventually get to where he'd go in the wrong building. They did kind of look alike, but Alzheimer's and stuff. And Jackson and I would just not say anything when I was walking because I wanted to see what would happen. Jackson makes a beeline to the side door, out the right way, brings him home. And so he became his constant companion and the source of great joy for all of us. Yeah. He became my best friend too. He was truly my partner in caregiving almost the whole time. He died a year before Daddy did. Mm. And he would come after, he would get in bed with them. And then once they were really asleep, I don't know how he did it, but as soon as I got in bed and turned the light off, he'd come and open my door and get on my bed and sleep with me for a while. Oh. I don't know how he could, how does he tell that I'm actually, anyway, he was amazing. And he would do I have pictures of Mom was in the hospital a lot. And Mr. Jackson would wear my sunglasses and he would get out of bed with her or Dad. And, he just was supervising everything. Mm-hmm. And so he was comic relief, and we would all laugh and everything. When he was younger, he would do the racing thing. How sometimes they'll just race back and forth between rooms.
Zoomies.
Yes. And that would make my mom laugh more than anything. And she'd just shake her head and laugh. And Daddy talk. He was like Dad's son, I swear, like the son he never had.
I love that.
You find, I've listened to your story and I want to make sure if there are places that people, because I know you shared a lot of photos, but your videos, things like that, Amy, you guys found joy in the most, there's these amazing places. Your mom and dad they sang, there was a video of that.
My dad in particular, my mom had a stroke when she was only 63.
Right.
So she had aphasia and was able to sing some, but Daddy was just a performer all the way. And he was in musicals growing up in summer theater when we were in Athens. And he was a performer all the way. So he loved to sing a song and it became, I talk a lot, as you guys know, about filling our tanks and the way that we have to take care of ourselves in order to have the energy to keep going. And literally just bursting into song with my dad would just make my tank go full, and that it did for him too. So I could observe what worked, and it would distract him. Music, constant companion. We could talk all day just about music, and yes, I have the professional background in that, but I think all caregivers can use music. You can watch some of my videos with Daddy singing and giving advice on my
I
YouTube
love that.
channel.
Yes.
That's Amy Goyer on my YouTube channel. And also, I made actually 2 videos for AARP, one on creating joy as a caregiver and just giving lots of examples. I mean, for example, we celebrate every holiday. And I learned this when I was working in adult daycare. Any excuse for a party, girls. So anything. Now, if it's a holiday, then you got to have headgear on, and you decorate for St. Patrick's Day or whatever, Valentine's Day, every holiday.
Got it.
And anything like mom would have a good checkup. We're going for cake pops.
I like this. I like Amy's. I like this.
You got to do it, because it's good for us and it's good for them. And, relationships are built on shared experiences.
Absolutely.
Across the generations. And so you have to create fun shared experiences, not just I'm helping you use the toilet, I'm taking you a doctor's appointment. You've got to have the fun stuff, and we watched a lot of musicals and would sing along, and that's joyful. Or like one time, many times, but one of the things I did once was I would take a theme like apples, and I'd get apples and we'd make an apple pie, and Dad would help do certain things. Mom would stir things and whatever. Then you smell it, and that stimulates your senses. And we'd sing, "Don't sit under the apple tree with me." And like it's a whole apple theme in the fall. And just do fun things like that. Sometimes it's hard when you're exhausted, and it gets harder with someone with dementia. It gets harder and harder because he became more and more in his own little world, and just kind of harder. It was so hard when I couldn't get him to smile as much, because my dad was very optimistic, very upbeat person, smiled a lot. And you have to remember that even if they have a flat affect, they're still there,
Yeah.
And just get that connection, sing that song together, eat that apple pie, stimulate good memories, have conversations. One time I got my dad's army locker out and started pulling out, here's your jacket, here's a picture of you at officers training school. And he just enjoyed that so much, even though he didn't remember all of it. And I'd say, yeah, Dad, you were in the 10th Mountain Division. You did, you ended World War II. And he'd be like, I did it, and he enjoyed that so much,
I love that. I think that brings as much joy for you as it does them.
In fact, I'll tell you this, and you guys need to be aware of this, that when Daddy finally died, we lost my niece to suicide in 2012. In 2013, my mom died. In 2014, my sister died. And my sister lived on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, and I was her primary caregiver too, power of attorney and everything, but wasn't able to give her the care I wish that I could have. But Daddy died then in 2018. And it took me a long time. I'm still really adjusting, to be honest. But I realized that I was happy doing this. It was so hard. It was so hard. But I was happy because I was putting so much effort into making them happy, giving them joy and creating joy and noticing the little joys. I have a video on that too. Just, my mom had the sweetest smile when I help her into bed at night, and she'd pull his covers up, and she never moved all night. And she was so, and you can be moving too fast and miss that stuff. Don't miss that stuff, because realize afterwards, like, I have to figure out how to be happy again, because I was so geared towards bringing joy to them and bringing joy to the situation. And I felt I was doing something important, and that brings joy. So you have to readjust. Like there can be so much joy in this, along with, the nights that you don't sleep and the crying and the no, all of the hard stuff, there can be so much joy. The last thing my dad said to me the night that he passed, got him into his recliner where he was sleeping at that point, and I got him all tucked in. I said, "You okay, Daddy?" And he said, "Thank you." That was the last thing he said to me. And my sisters and I sang the Lord's Prayer for him when he had got so he couldn't say it. He always said that every night, so we would do that. When he couldn't say it anymore, he could sing it, and so we would sing it. And he had kind of gotten to where he wasn't singing with us either, but he heard it, and I think that's, gosh, you can't do any better than that.
No, you can't. And here's the thing: who's the judge of doing better?
Yeah.
Like nobody's like, you did the best that you could, and the best was the best.
I can't remember if I told the story when I talked with you guys before, but I remember feeling like a failure all the time because it was so hard to stay on top of my mom's UTIs, and she would fall, and I just would kick myself for not having thought of just the thing to do to prevent something from happening, And I remember this very clearly, sitting at my desk and thinking, okay, what can I do about this? And realizing that me feeling like a failure wasn't helping me, and it wasn't helping them at all. So and then what's the opposite of failure? Success. So what would make me feel successful? And I thought, what's the one thing I know that I can do? And that is to do my best. I knew that I would never abandon them. I knew I would be there, be there with them and not abandon them. And I truly did do my best. And so I thought, that's success. If that's my goal, if that is a successful caregiver in my mind, then I can be successful. And it behooves me and it behooves them for me to feel successful, because then I'm a better caregiver. I'm happier. I'm better. It's better for my mental health, everything. And so that really changed things for me, to not be in the negativeness as much, and I have to remind myself, but that was really a turning point. So I really encourage you guys to always think about that. You're doing your best for your mom. And she knows that.
By all accounts for me, Amy, you are successful. Your story and just sharing it the way you do, it is an amazing success, but it is beautiful as well.
Thank you.
Absolutely beautiful.
Hey, ladies, I need to interrupt for just a second to share about the Sisterhood membership. It's basically a sale every day. And the best part, it's free. Here's the details. We're partnering with our friends at Benefit Hub and other care partners to save you money. With over 200,000 participating companies across the U.S. and abroad, you'll find discounts at your favorite local stores, huge savings on vacations, amazing deals on home, auto, and supplemental insurances, and everything in between. Go to confessionsofareluctantcaregiver.com to sign up, and then definitely tell your friends about it. They can join too. Trust me, there's a discount for everyone. And don't forget, it's free. Okay, back to confessing. So I didn't tell you, but we have, as we're kind of wrapping up, there's a little thing that we like to do as sisters called Sister Questions. They are our favorite questions. And so we get to ask any questions that
we do.
Here,
feel like. Oh, please put on your head.
Show you this picture of my sisters. You see it?
I love that.
It's the four of us.
I love
we
that.
love sister photos. And then I see is that your dad in the background?
I see your dad in the background.
That's my dad. That's us dancing at my sister's wedding. And then mom and dad are up there.
Yep. I see them. You'll have to share photos
y'all want to
with
see
us.
Mr. Jackson.
That's what I was getting ready to say.
Right.
Bring Mr. Jackson in.
Here's
I
told you, he reminds me of Oscar.
He looks just like Oscar, JJ's schnauzer. So that's why she talks about Mr. Jackson. And then
he's like my heart too.
He's in the heart. I get it. Yeah.
So Emily,
Mr.
Question do you have for Miss Amy?
Probably selfishly, I'm going to ask a question that I deal with every day, seems like. How did you keep your relationship with your boyfriend in good standing?
Yeah. I don't even know if I have a good answer. I think I was lucky. Texting saved our relationship, I would say, because, it's so, first of all, we had a time difference too.
Oh, that's right.
And Bill was a captain in the fire department. He retired partway through all of this, but, he would work 4 days on, and he was nights and he was days, and, our schedules were just never lining up, but we could text. And he's not a big phone talker, so no nice long conversations, not very often, I think one of the things that one time I write a column for AARP, and they had him do a guest column on Valentine's Day about being in a relationship with a caregiver. So look that one up. And he said it was about quality time, not quantity time, because
I like that.
Caregivers we're so busy, and, and our makes everything complicated, including our relationships. So really making quality time. So we would try at least once a year to go on a little trip together, even if it was, he came out to Arizona and we drove 2 hours away to Tucson and went for a weekend or something. Mm-hmm. And that's when, you get that quality time. And then I was fortunate too, that I did come back to DC for work. So there was times when I didn't see him for 3 or 4 months, but most of the time I got to see him, once a month or once every 2 months kind of thing. Mm. And so, that's important. We have shared values around family care. So I think that was huge. Mm-hmm. He was very supportive of what I was doing. I think people who don't get it they have more of a conflict. They don't understand you giving up your work, giving up your, things to care for family members. And so the fact that he didn't resent that was really helpful. And
I like how you said he had shared values around family care.
Yeah.
That feels like the secret sauce a little bit. You've got to have that.
And now his mom is older. She's 94 and she's doing great and still lives in her home. But, there are times when he has to do things and he helps take care of her house and everything. And, I'm very supportive of whatever he needs to do for his mom. There's no question.
I love that. Jay, what is your question? It can't be around Oscar.
It's not around Oscar, who's downstairs barking. I'm like, what is he barking at, a butterfly? I don't know
about him. Maybe Mr. Jackson is visiting him.
Good possibility.
Or it's possible there's a butterfly down there and he's going crazy. It's like, oh, I got to guard the house. Yeah. So I know that you've written on this topic before, and you spoke about it just a little bit earlier about making sure that you fill your tank. So what are just, if there were a top 3 things that you feel like are important to tell someone, these are the things you could use, tools to fill your tank, make sure it stays full. Singing, one of them, dancing probably.
But tell her answers.
But what? Well, I know I got to make sure she doesn't repeat. I mean, I need as much as I can. What are tank fillers?
So first of all, it's very important to have a blend of 4 different types of tank fillers. Quick things. Okay. And quick things for me would definitely be music, bursting into a song, making a good cup of coffee or tea. I'm telling you that is one of the things that, I don't know, it just fills you up somehow. A hug. That you have to have quick things while you're caregiving that can fill you up. And so some of them have to involve your loved ones, whether that be a hug. I could put my head on my dad's shoulder anytime and feel better, and petting the dog, just that moment. To me, having fresh flowers in the house, and my dad always did that for my mom. And so when he stopped kind of shopping, I kept that up, and I realized I was doing it for myself too. It just fills you up somehow. Mm-hmm. And then you have to have a blend of that along with premium fill-ups, like listening to this podcast, going to movie. Our Fun Friday adventures were premium fill-ups, and that keeps you going. It fills the tank a little bit further than the quickie things. Mm-hmm. And then you have to have routine maintenance, which is your daily stuff. You have to go to the doctors. You have to have your preventive healthcare. Do not skip your preventive healthcare appointments. You will regret it if you do. And you have to, for me, I did Pilates once a week. That became maintenance for me because my back, caregiving is hard on your body, and my back was bad and everything. Massages every once in a while were for me, partially because that's a good touch, and you're giving so much that it's somehow I'm an affectionate person. My dad was very affectionate. My family's very affectionate. And if you're not in a situation where you're receiving as much of that because you're giving more, or as dad got less reaching out, that helps that in some way. So you know what your routine maintenance is, eat. And honestly, okay, so you said music, sleep for me. Top three, absolutely. Because you cannot function when you're exhausted. You can't cope physically, and you can't cope emotionally, and you can't cope mentally. So that has to be a top priority. There was one time when I was sick, dad was sick, the caregiver left because she didn't want to get sick. And I had to hire somebody to come spend the night, even though dad was asleep most of the time, so I could get a good night's sleep. And then I get better. So sleep is big. And then tune-ups. So that thing I mentioned about my boyfriend and I having a weekend now and then, that was the other in the top three. My best friend, I'm so blessed that my best friend since first grade. She had cared for not only her father had early onset Alzheimer's, her husband had cancer for 17 years off and on. She had so much caregiving experience, so she understood. And she almost every year for almost 10 years got me away. She had a timeshare, and she would take me to a beach vacation thing. And I would work from there or whatever, but it was that beach thing really fills me up, So tune-ups are time away from caregiving. And you might make it an afternoon, you might make it a weekend, you might make it a week, whatever you can do.
I totally agree with that. I love tank fill. So quickies,
Fill your tank.
Premium fill-ups, routine maintenance, and then your tune-ups. I love all that. That's fantastic.
And don't forget, I'm going to reiterate, because after I gave a speech one time, a woman came up, she said, I figured out what I'm doing wrong. And I said, what? And she said, I'm only doing the quick fill-ups. I'm not doing the other ones. And, I said, yeah, you have to have a blend of all of these. You're mostly going to do quick things because right, Emily? You don't have time.
Don't have time.
You don't have so much time, right? So the quickie things become more and more important.
I love that. So here's the best one. This is my favorite question because I'm selfish and I ask it every time, and the girls let me. So what is your favorite guilty pleasure?
Dark chocolate.
I knew it. I knew you were going to say Godiva. Thank you, Godiva. If you'd like to sponsor this podcast,
send Amy chocolate. Please send Amy chocolate.
And it has to be dark chocolate. I mean,
agree.
And you notice I didn't hesitate. I have kind of known for this that I've always got some kind of dark chocolate in my purse. My parents both liked it too. So, I could always pull that out in the waiting room while we're waiting for a doctor appointment or whatever. Or if I start to get stressed, this is probably not the best coping skill, but maybe it's better than some other things. And I just, dark chocolate, like I am rarely without some type of really good dark chocolate. And it's not as much sugar, so it doesn't make me feel as guilty.
Exactly. Dark chocolate is good for you. Ask the Mediterraneans.
If I get stranded on a desert island,
Amy's going to be your person.
Yeah,
I'm thinking the same thing.
With you because I will have chocolate. I wrote a column once about a hospital survival kit, like what to take when your loved one's in the hospital. Chocolate, like that's on my list.
100%.
It's very
100%.
Amy, you are such a joy. You have brought us joy, and we so appreciate it. Just spending time with us.
We love to
find another sister that'll just, help us educate and relate to other people, but also just laugh and bring us joy. And you've definitely done that today.
And let me give you guys one little bit of advice, if I might.
Ready.
Be sure you do your fun sister things together through this. Okay. Don't let that slip, because you're dealing with a lot of heavy stuff. And I think that was one thing that I was so fortunate. My sister, Linda, who came from Ohio and ended up moving, she lived with us for a year with her two sons. And then the house next door came open for rent. So she was right there. She has a great sense of humor. And we could just laugh at stuff, and have some, and it was hard because I was on when she was off, basically, a lot of the time. So we rarely got to go do fun things together, but at least we had fun together. And then my other sister moved to California. So I wish we had done more of that and said, okay, once a year, we're doing a sister's day, it's something like that.
Yeah.
Because I think that makes a huge, huge difference. And you guys need to come through this together.
Yeah.
No, I totally agree.
Like that.
Amy, thank you so much for your words of wisdom. I love it. And we've done a sister trip before for Emily's 40th birthday, and we are already scheduling our next sister trip.
That's so fun. My sisters and I just scheduled, we're going to do this garden tour thing in 2 years. We're saving up for it. And, it's a special, special thing to have.
It is.
I mean, sometimes the best part is the planning. I mean, we put our diets on. We've got 18 months to start dieting every month.
Exactly.
So we're like, we're going to start next month. Yeah, no, it's fine. And then we're like, we don't care about it anyway. We're old.
My sister, Karen, passed, she was only 62. And that is such a shocker when that happens. Losing a sibling is awful. And I can't tell you how many times I feel robbed that we didn't get to have more fun times together. So treasure every moment.
100%.
Yeah. You guys are fun. I love you. Thank you so much. What you're doing. Thanks for sharing your journey as you go through caregiving. You're making a difference.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
Guys, thanks so much for listening in. Until next time. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, friends, that's a wrap on this week's confession. Again, thank you so much for listening. But before you go, please take a moment to leave us a review and tell your friends about the Confessions podcast. Don't forget to visit our website to sign up for our newsletter. You'll also find the video recording of all of our episodes on the Confessions website and our YouTube channel. Don't worry, all the details are included in the show notes below. We'll see you next Tuesday when we come together to confess again. Till then, take care of you. Okay, let's talk disclaimers. You may be surprised to find out, but we are not medical professionals and are not providing any medical advice. If you have any medical questions, we recommend that you talk with a medical professional of your choice. As always, my sisters and I at Confessions of a Reluctant Caregiver have taken care in selecting the speakers, but the opinions of our speakers are theirs alone. The views and opinions stated in this podcast are solely those of the contributors and not necessarily those of our distributors or hosting company. This podcast is copyrighted and no part can be reproduced without the express written consent of the Sisterhood of Care, LLC.